My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a literary podcast where we have been deep diving into your favorite novels.
This is Jack.
And I'm Amy.
And our listeners love to share their thoughts and theories via email and voicemail, so we're sharing some of them via our weekly mini episodes.
The views expressed by the hosts and listeners are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion, shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
Spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, death, and depression will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Today we're taking a step away from our usual ACOTAR content to speak with the author of Fringes, Ben Mercer. In recent years, Ben has garnered a following on his TikTok for his weekly TikTok live readings and his book recommendations. Before his TikTok success, Ben was a professional rugby player, playing in England and Australia before making it to France. In his book Fringes, Ben talks about his time in France as well as the inner workings of professional athletics. We're excited to have Ben on the show today. Welcome, Ben.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for coming today and for answering all of the emails that we harass and send you.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's just nice to have a bit of life in my inbox as well. So yeah, thank you.
It's just us there being like, hey, us again.
Yeah, you just keep slotting in. Yeah.
So I originally found you on TikTok through your weekly live reads, and you recently did one that was about a mountain lion in LA, and I caught one of those, and it was sad and depressing, but it was a really good book. Your followers there are very dedicated to you. How did you start out? How did you realize people like to watch you read? Because that's a very specific voyeuristic thing.
No, I was working for a startup part-time, and I'd started down my kind of authoring business, I suppose, and I'd written Fringes, and that had gone pretty well. And I was doing this other book. So these were, particularly the second one, was very much like a kind of lockdown project that was great to have. And after 2 years at the startup, I was a little bit like, okay, I think I've kind of had enough, and I've kind of learned what I'm going to learn here, and I'd like to kind of go in on myself for a little bit. And what I found with Fringes was, without any social media profile, only kind of 1,000 followers on Instagram and Twitter or whatever, it was pretty difficult for me to get like the word out there. And because I'd self-published it, it was something that I really had to wrestle with. Yeah. So I was a bit like, well, if you want to kind of go out on your own, you probably ought to do some social. And I had been presenting a lot of Zoom sessions online during the pandemic for the startup, so private Zoom sessions with other athletes. Okay. But so the other thing was that actually the books I'd written were kind of nonfiction. They're about sport, but the books I read are mostly not those things. Like there's, fiction and nonfiction of kind of all stripes, mostly kind of literary fiction, but I'll kind of dabble in anything really. And I thought, right, okay. And I figured out this format where I could just sit and narrate a passage from a book that I liked. And it would be kind of a bit of a mix of me narrating, being on camera, sharing books that I loved, and just felt that it was quite a kind of nice combo of different factors. And I thought TikTok was kind of the growth platform. And the other thing was that I was like, I can do this. And because I'm like in my 30s, none of my friends are on this. So if I'm a complete...
they can't make fun of you and they don't know it.
Yeah. They won't even notice. So I was like, right, I'll do this for 2 weeks. I'll do it every day. And I picked this one format. And I was just like, I'll see how it goes. And the first video actually did really well. It was Normal People, which was buzzy at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And after that, so I kept doing videos. And then as I was going on, I was hearing about sort of lives and what you could do on there. And I was like, well, the obvious thing to do is to sit and read live. And I thought the other thing would be quite a sort of fun skill to practice as well. And so I sort of jumped in and did one. And then people seemed to like it, but I was a little bit like more nervous maybe when I started, or maybe not quite so conversational with the comments. And it's quite difficult because when you're reading as well, you can't really see what people are saying necessarily until you stop. And so some of the chats could get quite unhinged, I believe.
I've seen them. They are, I mean, let's be honest, they are a thirsty bunch. Oh my God. It's I blush at some of the comments, but then people just get very caught up in what you're reading as well and what the book's about.
It's a bit of a mix. I think I feel like maybe familiarity breeds contempt, and maybe the thirst dropped off a little bit. But people, they're super nice, and they kind of self-regulate a little bit. If people get out of hand, then people are a bit like, "Come on!" And I've got one or two people who kind of help moderate now as well. But people are really into the books, and I think one of the things that's fun but also tough is picking the right live read. I think there's and I did Song of Achilles at one point, which was kind of big on the platform, so I felt like that had a lot of people who are keen to hear that one. And then sometimes you pick one and you're like, oh, people hate this, or sometimes it's something that doesn't actually read that well out loud. And sometimes you only discover these things while you're doing them. So something like The Beach by Alex Garland, which I love, or old kind of cult classic really. You're reading that and you're like, oh, this is actually quite staccato when you read it out loud. You're like, it doesn't flow that well. But something like Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson, that's really lyrical, and he's a poet, kind of poetry background. So you're like, well, that really comes through when you're narrating it live. And then you feel like, oh, this really works. So I'm getting into the flow of it as I'm going. So it's interesting. You only discover those things about the book
until you're out there reading it live. Yeah. It's so true. When I do see you do your lives, I'm incredibly jealous with how you can just read it without messing up, because we can't at all.
Our show is scripted and we mess up all the time.
All the time. I can't read a freaking quote and it's just one line. I have to say it 5 times over, and you're just reading it. And you don't have to start over. It is fascinating. So you've nailed down reading really well.
Yeah, thank you. I think I was always one of those kids. I used to like being picked on to read in class. When it was sort of read out loud, and I actually always did like being that kid. I was probably a bit of a show off, but actually I did like putting a bit into the readings. I was like, well, if we're going to have to listen to it, I don't want to listen to someone going,
passion, put heart behind it.
I'm going to give it some. And and it's funny, sort of ways into the kind of TikToking, I actually remembered that. And I was like, oh, when I was a kid, I did actually like doing exactly this.
What you're doing. And it's just carried throughout your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, lain dormant till now.
I used to read out loud to people all the time in college. This is strange. I will say, if you ever read ACOTAR out loud, the ACOTAR community hasn't really found you. We talk about that a little bit later, but they haven't found you yet. And it's a different beast. And I know some have, because they've mentioned you to us. But if you ever read ACOTAR, just fair warning, you're entering a field of...
Maybe my email inbox might fill up a bit quicker. Yeah, no, I think that's one of the really interesting things about TikTok, like and the book talk thing is it's so siloed off. So, and I've had the odd comment, not necessarily people have mentioned ACOTAR like and asked if I'm going to read it, but sometimes people are like, oh, if this section finds you or this, and you're like, what? I don't even know what that is. But yeah, it's
what's a Feyre? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a character.
Please say, be careful how you speak to my high lady. I suspect you'll start getting comments of like, please say this quote.
Yeah, there's the men on Book Talk who get like trapped under ACOTAR because like the community,
the women,
the women, like you just kind of get a little kidnapped in there, and the poor men have to like read everything, and they very much go after the British. So
interesting.
You've been warned, but at the same time, embrace it.
No, thank you. I have got it because I think I got it on a Kindle deal ages ago, and it's something that I've been meaning to get around to. So I will at some point read it.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes.
It's one of those things you're avoiding or ignoring for now.
No, I think these things sometimes, like with books, you really do stockpile them, don't you? And then the other thing is now I'm getting sent more stuff as well, and you end up being like, oh, I'm never going to get, I'm never going to get to all these. But I think ACOTAR is something that like, and it's a genre that I haven't read loads of as well, like more recently. Whereas I think it's a fantasy. It is a fantasy book, isn't it?
Fantasy.
Yeah. So like that's one of the genres that really got me into reading, like as a young person as well. So I think it's something I'm definitely keen to kind of get into and sort of and experiment with again.
It's surface level. I think a lot of people, I mean me included, the first time I read it, it was very surface level, and you look at it and you're like, oh, it's like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I didn't spoil anything. That's like it's on the back. And it's but once we started doing the analysis, we realized we're like, oh shit, there was actually a lot that went into this, like things like the main character struggles with food insecurity. So how are the power dynamics interlaced with food, with who's eating it, who's giving it,
interesting.
That type of thing.
Yeah.
We talk about it on the podcast, but you don't have to. Don't listen to the podcast. It's
not until I've read. Not until I've read it.
Or ever. Yeah. It's embarrassing. Like I don't like to know people who've listened to it.
Yeah. You task everyone with spreading the word as much as possible.
But yeah, it's like there is a lot more that goes into it. So if you ever read it and you're like, it's a cute book, it is, but there's a lot more. So.
I think with those like sort of genre things or fantasy and sci-fi that are a little bit more out there with the setting. I think they need that. They need something like that that feels real to ground everything and actually have, like you say, to have it go beyond just the sort of plot on the page. You do need those kind of little roots in, and I think that's pretty interesting. I was one of the things. So you're talking about. I was in California for an author talk, and it was Amor Towles, who wrote A Gentleman in Moscow, and he was talking about his approach to writing novels, and he was saying that he often gets emails from his readers correcting him on kind of historical detail, or and he was saying historical detail for him is like a kind of blurry backdrop, like you'd have in a theatre. And he's as long as the people at the front of the stage feel real to you, then like that's what will kind of grab the reader, and most of them will overlook the kind of the detail. And I think that with those genre, like fantasy and sci-fi, so if the people feel real and like their decisions feel real for for reasons that you can kind of identify with, then they could be wherever you want, and that's quite fun, isn't it?
That oddly brings me comfort as a fantasy writer that. Oh, I don't have to be like obsessive about making sure of continuity as long as it's not withdrawing my reader from the experience and from the characters.
Yeah, I think so.
So kind of going back to what we were saying, you are on a very different side of book talk than we are, since we're very entrenched in ACOTAR and new adult fantasy world. What kind of books have you found resonated most with you and your audience on book talk?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the kind of obvious classics, like real classics, so like Great Gatsby or some of the Jane Austen, actually. People love Austen talk, that's big. And Song of Achilles had a real moment in the sun, it felt like. And then Circe, I don't think was quite as kind of, didn't grab everyone quite as much, the sequel, but people do love it as well. And I do think there's a bit of it's obviously a sort of popular genre now. There's a lot of these kind of Greek myth retellings. I think that's an area that people seem to really like. And then I think things like Sally Rooney, like people have, I think maybe the more kind of romance, like Sally Rooney obviously isn't necessarily a romance author, but the novels all do deal with romance in some respect. So I think people love to hear those stories as well. And then, I mean, like, I did the Northern Lights over, the Golden Compass, His Dark Materials first book. I did that over kind of the winter, over Christmas sort of period, which for me is something that I reread a lot, and I love.
I love the Golden Compass.
Oh, I love it, and I think certain things like that where people are sort of something that they used to love, and then I haven't seen this for ages. So there's a bit of a spread. I think there is a bit of a. I think people are there like to relax a little bit sometimes, or to have something a little bit more fantastical. And I think that's maybe why the myths are popular, because they're not. Again, they're sort of timeless stories, but they're not necessarily too grounded in reality, which is quite nice. People just want to sort of listen to a story.
Well, I like your point, though. It's really what you're finding is everything's nostalgic almost. You're tapping back into the things that we loved as children. You're tapping back into the myths that we're all familiar with. And something about that continues to appeal to audiences for some reason. And why not? Why not use that?
Yeah, I think, and the classics are classics, for a reason, and they might be a little outdated, or they might, they're about a kind of an era gone by, but people remember them. And there's a sort of, not everybody goes, I did English Lit at university, but not everybody goes on to do more, but everybody is forced to read certain books. And actually, if they've rediscovered books as an adult, then these are the books they remember kind of doing, and they were their gateway into literature, maybe. So I think there probably is. I think you're probably right. There probably is a nostalgia element to a lot of it. And just probably being read to a little bit. I know audiobooks and podcasts are obviously sort of much more popular and increasingly popular, but I think the idea of being read to, it doesn't really happen.
It is comforting. Yeah. You talked about the classics, and earlier this year I had it in my head to because I read a lot of trash, but I love my trash. And
God, like what? Like what are we saying?
Oh, I mean, what the smart one I read, or the trash that I read?
Or just give me an example. What are you saying is sort of trashy?
Trashy. Smutty.
Oh, okay.
There was a dragon involved, okay? I'm not gonna...
This is like a read on your Kindle,
Yeah, that's exactly
Look,
what it is.
Was there a stalker involved? Yes, but it's fine. The dragon was very nice. He was a gentleman. But I got it in my head to read The Count of Monte Cristo earlier this year, because I was like, I should balance it out. I'm like, this is a big book, and I was this close of ditching it, but then you popped up on my TikTok, and you're just like, keep going. And then there's that. And then Disneyland has a sandwich called Monte Cristo. So I really wanted to eat the sandwich. I respect your opinion, and everywhere else. It just was, I mean, it's, not class. I love classics, but the Monte Cristo one, it's so freaking long for, we could have condensed this for so much.
It's a long book, but
I enjoyed the last 100 pages of it.
Oh, you made it. You made it.
Yeah. I wanted my sandwich.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Well, you deserve it. Yeah.
At that point, and the sandwich wasn't even that great. It all just kind of came together.
No, I think, and that's another quite interesting. So obviously it is a really long book, and it's quite episodic. And then you realise that it was released, it was serialised in newspapers, or and Dickens was similar. So he was someone who was serialised in newspaper, and you're like, well, it was in his sort of financial interest to keep writing,
keep going.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's like the Vampire Diaries of its day. We're just kept going.
We are flogging this to the bitter end. Yeah.
That book, man, it was, I can't remember the thought I had, but it was a beast. And
I love it. It's my favorite.
At the end, I definitely got it. Oh, is it your favorite?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's great. I love the book. It was the best book. No.
You're entitled to your opinion. I just
I think I mean, he's a playwright. That's what I was going to say. He's a playwright, and you can just really tell that he's a playwright in it, because he gets the monologues are the ones that I think I kept getting mad at, because I'm like, if I'm not allowed to talk this long, then neither can you.
That's actually really interesting as well, because obviously he has different identities that he sort of picks up and drops. So he's got all these different guises that he adopts throughout, and that's very stagey, isn't it? Put a mask on and run on and confuse someone. But I think maybe, and I don't know if this is the case. I don't know if it's maybe quite a sort of male appealing idea to kind of be imprisoned. It's almost like his Rocky training montage. You know, he goes in this kind of very gauche young man who doesn't understand what's happened to him, and he comes out this like worldly guy who's got the answers to everything, and you know, suddenly he's Bruce Wayne. He's got this cave of treasure.
Yeah. He came through the full metamorphosis of the ultimate man.
Yeah, and then suddenly he's in command of every situation he's in, and you're just like, yeah, I'd like to be like the Count. Yeah.
I mean, he is slick as hell. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, he is slick. Yeah.
Smooth transition into the next question. As we mentioned in the intro, you have a very unique background. You went from professional rugby player to author. Did you feel like that was a really big jump, or did it feel like a natural transition to you?
I feel like when I was a kid, the things I was into were sports and books. And when I was at school, I got good at rugby and I developed this goal to be a professional rugby player. But it was prior to that, I'd probably been more into books than I was into rugby, or at least, I'd say that was the case. And so, you know, if you love books, you do sort of entertain the idea. I think it's like, yeah, maybe one day I'll do it, sort of thing. Maybe one day. And it was a skill, you know, like writing was something I was decent at, and people were asking me for little bits of writing when I was playing rugby, or asking me to look at things that they'd written and, you know, give them some feedback, and nothing too wild, just for, you know, their business or little blog posts or whatever it was, consultancy reports and stuff like that. But yeah, I always kind of thought, yeah, once I'm done, then I'll kind of explore writing. And obviously I should have sort of started earlier, but you know, I'm not perfect. And afterwards I spent a year after rugby sort of trying all these different like career ideas, doing little bits of freelance work, doing all these different jobs. I did a start writing fiction course because I was like, here's a kind of, and I always recommend this course if people want to kind of experiment with writing, because it's free. It's with the Open University in the UK. It's online. And what's good about it is it gives you assignments that you have to submit, and you get to do it anonymously. So it's like, there's no kind of, this is who I am and here's my work. It's like, here's a piece of writing and two people will feedback on it for you, and you feedback on other people's. And yeah, it's just a way of kind of getting a few of those early sort of hurdles out of your own way, in a way, when you know, maybe you want to experiment with some writing. And after a year, I put a link, or it's not quite a year maybe, but I put a LinkedIn post up about retiring from rugby. I got offered some blogging work, which was based around rugby. But as I was kind of, I'd note take ideas for that. And I started to kind of get ideas that weren't appropriate for the blog, but were more about like my career and stuff. And as they went on, I sort of started getting this idea that I could turn it into a full length book. And then I thought there was just this confluence of factors where it was like, I had the idea, I had the time, and then I had this real, like, you know, you've always said you wanted to write a book, like in your head, that's what you've always said. And here it is, here's your opportunity. And like, do you want to be that person or don't you? And it was a bit of a like, I don't even know what to call it, a crossing the Rubicon moment. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. So I did it, and it didn't feel unnatural to me. It felt like quite a nice way of almost drawing a line under my rugby a little bit as well, and saying goodbye to it and celebrating it and telling people about it. So I think I didn't appreciate that people didn't know those things. I think the things for me that seemed obvious and were just part of my kind of day to day, and even my close friends who'd been over to stay with me in France and stuff, you know, when I was telling them some sort of war stories, they were like, what? You know, like, does that actually happen? They were like, does that happen? I'm like, yeah. And then you're just like, oh, well, if people don't know, you know, I had a different perspective, I thought, to the other kind of, particularly rugby, but like to other kind of sports books, because they weren't about like, oh, I won the World Cup or, you know, the NBA or whatever. It was like, it was this other slice of it that people weren't really aware of.
It was shocking. Like, there were definitely parts where I never questioned if it was real, but it just felt like fiction, because you're like, this can't happen. Like, I mean, so many examples, but for whatever reason, this is the first one that popped in my head, that you said that you were doing like a drug test and you had to do like the pee in the cup thing. And then some guy put his head on your shoulder and just was like watching you. And it's like, that can't be a real thing, but you know, not questioning the story. It just is like, is that a French thing, or is that just like,
I think that was a him thing, because So with the drug test, they obviously do have to watch you. So you normally you normally turn on like an angle, but I said, "Oh, do you want me to turn?" And he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it." I was like, "This guy's chill." And then suddenly, I start my business, and then suddenly this chin rests on my shoulder, and I'm just like, "What the fuck?" And then the guy's obviously just sort of looking straight down. I was like, "Wow."
Do you know if he did that to everyone else? Maybe you were special. Maybe he felt a comfort with you.
Yeah, actually, I can't remember. I must have mentioned it. Or maybe I was too shocked and just went home and turned the lights off.
Aggressively washed your shoulder.
But to your point about things being real, it's quite funny because like after the book had come out and stuff, one of my old teammates, when I saw him, he was like, "Congratulations on your novel." And I thought that was quite a nice touch. He was obviously like, you're just talking shit for a whole book, not real.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying you talk shit, but you like when you introduce, they're not characters, they're human beings. So
they are characters, though.
Yeah, but when you introduce someone, you did this a couple times with the most savage comments about them. Like they had clown feet and played like shit. They're the worst players I've ever seen. But then they have like a beautiful journey and then they turn out to be great. But like when you introduce them, I was like, oh my God, you hate them? No, but oh my, yeah, I need to I type some of they're not insults, they're just commentary. But I save some of them so that I can save them as an insult for other humans. If I need to.
Great. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I think, and actually when people ask, I think I said in the book, there's only really one person I can remember that I ever didn't get on with in a team I play for. Everybody, it's something where everyone's so different, and particularly in France, where we're all from completely different places. People from Eastern Europe or the Pacific Islands or New Zealand, or obviously loads of French guys. There are so many different people, but South America, we had this Argentinian guy who was white, he was a crazy guy. But you just develop this. Yeah, it's just fun. It's part of the fun, and everyone's obviously sort of taking the piss out of each other the whole time. But yeah, it really is a kind of, you develop a great affection for these people, even if they were bad at rugby. They're people that you end up, you love the memories you have of them because they're so funny, or they were such an interesting person, or not everything is predicated around your playing ability. I think sometimes there are people you'll remember that that they weren't even the best player. They were just cool or weird. And it's interesting who you keep up with.
And it wasn't like you talked about them just in the context of rugby. You definitely gave humanity to the living, breathing human beings.
Oh, I'm pleased. Well, thank you. Yeah.
So I listened to the audiobook, and going into this, I had zero knowledge of rugby. And even though I lived in England, I watched it one time, was really fascinated that you guys all pick up one person. And then I was like, I need to be a part of that, but I wasn't. Somehow couldn't find a rugby team to help me with this, but you did such a good job of not just explaining the parts of rugby, but also tapping, like what we were saying, the human elements of sports. Would you say that your experience with players, coaches, and everyday politics are a universal experience that branch out beyond professional sports?
So what I've my little thesis, I suppose, about sports is that it's just a great frame for life, because it's just a bit of a focuser, because your life in sport is over quickly. I retired when I was 30, and that's relatively common. I mean, mid 30s would be pretty old for rugby.
Oh, wow.
or professional football even, or most professional sports really. And so you just live on this slightly accelerated timeline where everything's more pressurized, and you've got these kind of performances at the weekend there's a focus on you for those bits. But you're exactly right. I think the things that you experience within it are kind of universal experiences. They're just heightened because they're in this kind of focused prism, I suppose, of professional sport. But yeah, I think it's also, there's a lot of time sitting around. You train a lot. You work really hard, to the point you're exhausted or in genuine physical and mental turmoil. But but there is a lot of sitting around. There's a lot of traveling. There's a lot of hanging around in cafes. There's a lot of kind of really tedious meetings. You have to sort of look like you're paying attention in.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of time to kind of to observe people and to get to know people. And you obviously sort of have to understand a bit about who your teammates are to work well with them. How does he like to be spoken to, or how do I have to, what communication do I need to give that person as opposed to that person? And how do I get the best out of them when it's like this? And I think so. You do need to develop. Obviously it's just sort of relationships, but you have to do that in a short period of time, because people, particularly at the lower level that I played at, tend to have year-to-year deals. So it's like, someone might be there for a year and gone the next. So, within a couple of months, you need to figure out a way of working with them. Otherwise, if something clearly doesn't work, then it won't happen again for the rest of the year. So, it's on you to kind of get to know everybody and try and not only get the best out of them and out of yourself, but then, obviously to sort of serve the wider group if you can as well. So yeah, I think it is just, it's just the same. I think you'd find these other group dynamics. People often kind of conflate the armed services, like the military and places like that. But I'd say like a lot of sort of stressful jobs, maybe like if you thought about like a doctor in an operating theatre, that's a sort of team with one person really is the sort of tip of the spear. Or I'm sure there are other environments as well. Maybe a startup where you've got, you're burning your money and there's 5 of you and you need to get the best. You need to do it quickly. I think there are other environments where I'm sure these dynamics come into play as well. But sport's just a really obvious one that people kind of all know about, and you don't necessarily need to even have a common language. I mean, obviously it helps, but there's a reason that soccer, is so popular. It's so popular. It's like, cause it's universally understandable. And there are guys that play together who can't actually communicate linguistically. It's crazy, really.
Yeah. It's like almost like you lived a lifetime within like a short block of time. I mean, even just the concept of, I have to learn how to get along with this person or nothing's going to get done. That's a life lesson that people in their 50s, 60s, 70s never learned. And to kind of go under that pressure cooker, it's, like you just went through all of the learning phases of everything. You're done. You did it.
Well, thank you. I completed it. But so I've just recently put together a handbook for athletes to sort of navigate the end of career transition into work and to find work. And it's something I'm just refining at the moment. I've got it with some test readers, but I opened it actually, and I talk about Achilles, funny enough, because Achilles goes to the Trojan War, but before he goes, he gets a choice. And he's told, you can stay here and you'll live a long, happy life, and you'll grow up and you'll have children, and they'll have grandchildren. Everybody will love you and you'll live and it'll be beautiful. But you'll die, and people, within a generation, 2 generations, like no one will know who you are. You'll just be sort of, your name will fade away. Or if you go to Troy, you'll never come back, but people will remember you forever. And he obviously chooses Troy, eternal glory, and a sort of early death. And when you choose to play sport, that you are making this gamble in a way. You're like right, I want a shot at the glory, but there's no guarantee that you're going to do it. And you know that you will sort of die in a sporting sense, because you can't compete forever. And that's the sort of, to your point about living a lifetime, you do live a lifetime. You're a young guy. In rugby, you're a young guy when you're kind of 19, 20, 21, and then you're middle. I suddenly felt, I'm 28 years old, and suddenly I'm sort of one of the older ones in my team, and I'm thinking like, hang on, I don't feel old, like, and then when I'm 30, and suddenly, if we line up by age, I'm like way over to the old end. I'm just like, what is going on, and then so it's
going through like an age crisis.
No, it really is like. You really do have that moment where you're like, oh, I am an old boy here. And actually, like, your life is not even half over. You're actually your real life.
Yeah. You get to do the part 2.
Yeah.
You got a plot twist.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've twisted. I've really twisted.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Well, Jack has kindly briefed me on your book. And so I understand that you write about the fact that even though your job was centered around events where they would go to watch the team play and celebrate the team, it was also a very isolating experience because your job schedule was around the free time of the masses. By living on that different schedule and that different perspective, kind of saw a unique side of people in society. Do you think that perspective helps you with your writing, especially if you pursue writing fiction in the future?
Yeah, I do think so. I think, like I said before, you do get a lot of time to kind of observe people, and whether that's, your mates in the team, or whether you're sat in a cafe sort of seeing the world go about its business while you don't really have anything to do on a Thursday afternoon, which is very pleasant. But I do think I'd say yes and no. I think the thing you miss from sport is the community. It really is the community, and you don't actually even really miss the games. You don't miss the playing of the sport, really. You just miss like hanging around with people who are similar to you, who you're friendly with, spending so much time together. Trying really hard at something with other people is really nice. I think that's what you miss. And I think the normal life is a lot more solitary than professional sport is, in my experience. And writing and that sort of stuff is, it is solitary. And I still like, having that kind of, I tend to go out to cafes and write and do my work in public, so I see people, and but that is one of the big changes for me is the solitary element. But I think, you're right. Like, writing is a sort of observational practice, isn't it? And it is, you have to notice things, and I think it's hard to notice things if you're only ever inside in front of a computer. I think, like, for me, I need to be out and about, and I need to kind of see people. And and I don't know. Well, the second book I did actually was with another guy, so we co-authored it, and that was actually really fun, because something's always getting done, and there's someone to vent to, and then once the work belongs to both of you, you can be quite ruthless with it in a way that you probably are in sport. Like, once the game's happened, afterwards you can normally be quite objective about it and be like, oh, I did that badly, or, you know, this and that. But with this book project, was the writing belonged to both of us, we could be quite like, oh, that was rubbish, get rid of it. Just get rid.
That's true. I mean, Amy and I have written some things together, and I can definitely be much more harsh on that than my own writing. It is like you are kind of separated from it in a weird way.
No, I think so.
I like group writing.
Yeah, and you do see people do these things, don't they? They do write books together, but or, you know, I think sometimes maybe that relationship is a little bit maybe kept on the down low. But
we wrote a rock opera.
Did you? Yes,
based off of Muse's album Absolution.
Really? Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah. With the Heath Wuthering Heights inspired by.
Yeah.
It sounds
like dystopian society.
It sounds wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is interesting how somehow joint ownership means no ownership, in the sense of like, I don't identify with this anymore. I can treat this as somebody else's work.
Yeah, definitely. It's easy. And I think with the first book with Fringes, and that was just myself, and I had an editor, like, and she looked at it and gave me all these things to do, so I did those. And then later on, because I was only on my own timeline, so I was just sort of tinkering, and you could tinker forever, you know, you could do it forever. Whereas, when you're with someone else, there is an element, like one of you will snap and be like, right, that's enough.
I'm done.
It's like,
that's usually me.
No, I think I'm just like, I don't want to be the problem, so I just keep going. It's like, I don't want to be the one that fails us. I'm kind of backtracking a little bit, but you're saying that you wish that you started writing sooner, but I actually think that you did it right. Only because, like, Amy and we met in college, and we both majored in creative writing.
Oh, cool.
And then my master's, I did comparative literature, but like it kind of butchered writing a little bit for it. And to be able to like give, like, we both struggled afterwards trying to write. So I think there's something about, like, you lived life, you kept reading, the fact that you're willing to write with other people fairly early on in your own writing career, it's, to me, I think, is the better path.
I think, like, I don't treat it like my sport necessarily, but I'm under no illusions as to, you know, like, like my level of talent, or I don't think I'm by any means done, or that I know everything. So particularly early on, I'm quite happy to try different things, or, you know, to be exposed to different things. And actually, I've always wondered about one of those programs, if I kind of benefit from them, or whether, and they seem to be quite a good route to getting your work published sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. I do quite like the kind of autodidact idea, but I think I can be quite humble about my work, because I just know I've got a long way to go. It's actually quite nice. You're like, oh, well, I can only get better at this. You know, like,
yes.
Yeah. To kind of jump on what Jack was saying, my experience was that my education killed my imagination. And it took me a decade to kind of get that back, especially as a fantasy writer, which is extremely important. What has always brought me comfort, years ago, I saw, probably in some sort of magazine, Business Week or something, a comparison of popular authors and the periods of time when they were writing versus when they were successful. And the more successful ones were writing in their late 20s through their 30s and didn't have success until their 40s.
Interesting.
And so that always brought me comfort as a 20 and 30 something year old, of like, oh, I'm not even in my prime yet. Like, I still have lots of time to read and develop. And I think that that's actually extremely important. To live more life, to be able to speak to a broader human experience in your own writing.
Yeah, I think it's hard, isn't it? Like, when you're a young person and you don't know a lot. I mean, we do, obviously, because those stories are exciting. So, you know, I love Zadie Smith, and Zadie Smith got a big deal while she was still studying English at Cambridge, and you know, so she must have been 21 or something like that. There's Bret Easton Ellis, who's someone, you know, who's super interesting, but you know, those are quite rare. Those people are rare. So, you know, I just read the Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and that's been a huge success, and it's great. And I didn't know anything about her, and then I, you know, looked her up afterwards, and she'd written sort of 5 or 6 books already. And you're just like, well, yeah, it'd be so difficult for this to be something that you did when you were 24. So I think, you know, people should cut themselves some slack in a way. And I think the thing that I don't know if I'll do it forever, but I feel like I could write forever and I could improve at it forever. Whereas with my sport, it was like, you will peak and you will get worse. And then you're sort of just trying to arrest your own decline as much as possible. Whereas I think something like writing, it is like, well, yeah, I think to your point, you can easily get better at this. You know, you can get better. You can get better day to day, week to week, book to book. You know, it's something year to year as you meet more people, see more places, learn more stuff. I think interesting that you said that your education killed your sort of imagination a little bit. And this Amor Towles talk I was at, so he writes, you know, sort of historical fiction really, but he was saying that he almost gets an idea, so like a premise, and then he's like, right, a man lives in a luxury hotel, which is Gentleman in Moscow. And it's like, why would he only live in a luxury hotel? Because this. So what scenario in history did this happen? Russian Revolution. And then he was like, I flesh it out and go as quickly as possible without over-researching. And I think something like fantasy must be a tough one because there's a sort of necessary element of world building and kind of getting those foundational kind of elements in place. But
yeah, it's annoying.
Yeah, but
I write fantasy too. I hate it. I love it.
But I'd have thought like some speed early in the process would be good. I think if someone's out there maybe prevaricating, I'm just like, I think if you just actually go for it and then figure it out, like once you're like, right, I've got something, I'm committed to this. Like, actually, how does it work? You know, rather than figuring out every last detail. I think you could just kill your own enthusiasm.
And unfortunately, I think other people can kill your own enthusiasm because they're like, well, you're not obeying the rules or you're not doing this correctly. And if you don't have the right community supporting you and encouraging you, they're just bringing you down. And unfortunately, when you're in a writing program, it's going to be a mixed bag. And
it's petty.
80% of them suck.
And then people get annoyed. Yeah.
It's egotistical.
A bunch of 20-something-year-olds just being little shits. Like,
yeah.
One of my favorite parts of the book is when you talk about being a man and then manning up. How one is fueled by admirable traits like wanting to help people, be there for the little guy, while the other is filled with toxicity. I see that mentality in my own everyday life, but I don't really see that as much in literature. And maybe it's because I'm reading the wrong or right books, but has that been your own experience as well, that men are free from the concept of manning up when it comes to fictional characters?
Are you saying men are free, that they're kind of free to do whatever they want, or that they're free from the kind of need to do the sort of toxic version of manning up?
I only see the toxic version of manning up in my everyday life.
Right.
And whenever I see it in literature, it's always the villain, right? And even though in my everyday life, I kind of see some men who feel like they have to, quote unquote, be that like man up thing. So there's something about it where in the real world, sometimes some people are just like, yes, I have to be this, tough, toxic guy. But then in literature, that's not the ideal. That's not the goal.
Why is there that disparity?
Yeah, like why is that? And so I kind of feel like there's almost this freeing element to it, that like, I mean, I'll go back to the Count of Monte Cristo. Like he didn't man up at the end. He was like a man. He was there to help people. He help the little guy do what he can. But then, you kind of had like, oh, the hell if I know any other characters' names, forget them all. But, you have these other people who have those toxic traits. So it's just kind of a,
no, it's an interesting, I mean, I think what was interesting, so, in terms of, I'm going to answer this in a sort of trite manner, but when you sort of do TikTok videos and you think, all right, it's Father's Day, like here's some sort of like literature big daddies, sort of thing, and you're like, there's so many obvious great father figures. You're just like, oh, there's all these obvious ones, and there's sort of Atticus Finch, or like, there's all these people in classics, but also in more contemporary things, Call Me by Your Name, which I love. There's this incredible kind of father-son moment right at the end of the book, or the film, also worth watching. But actually, do you know what I found was when it was Mother's Day, and my friends that run a floristry business, and they were looking for names for their bouquets. And they're like, oh, got some names of great mothers from books. And when you thought about it, you're like, no, there aren't any.
It's true.
Yeah.
The mother is always the villain.
There aren't any. And I think one of the suggestions was Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. I was like, well, she's like played for laughs, you know? And it's like,
Yeah.
No, she's awful. Maybe Mrs. March from Little Women.
Yeah, that's the only one that we could kind of come up with. And actually, I think there are a lot of really lovely like fatherhood models in books that are a bit idealized in some ways, or in other ways there's someone, so even in Tomorrow the character, he's had a hard time for various reasons, but he's not a perfect guy. He does some sort of, he behaves in slightly off manner, but he gets this journey throughout the book, which kind of it doesn't redeem him necessarily, but you realize it humanizes him. You understand the reasons he improves as a person. You're just like, it's really rather lovely. But yeah, I don't know if women do get that leeway in literature. If there aren't these like idealized mothers, which maybe you could say is more realistic, but actually there is a sort of, they're always portrayed negatively rather than like.
This just got flipped on its head, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're right. What the hell?
It's quite funny. It was
inherent misogyny.
Yeah.
Yeah, just noticed it in the last, I think it was the last couple of months. So it was Mother's Day. When was that? A couple of weeks ago. Anyway, yeah, it was an interesting one. And then actually, when you look into kind of publishing industry, it's like, I mean, most of the people in it and most published authors are women as well. So you're like, I think the New York Times had some sort of survey, and these things are quite difficult to get a handle on because there's all these different books and different places they come from, and it's quite disparate. So I think really accurate statistics are quite difficult, but most people who buy books are women, and I think most published authors, I think 60% or something are women. So you're just like, this is a weird thing. I think these classic books are a different story, obviously, because I think maybe it was probably a more male dominated thing. But it is interesting. You're like, well, where are these? Where are these like sort of non-Harridan mothers? Like why aren't...
What I'm hearing is that we're the problem. We're writing our own issues.
Well, no, I don't know. I would not offer an opinion on that.
Well, ACOTAR, like the parents, again, this isn't too much of a spoiler.
They're both
but the parents,
terrible.
Yeah.
They're both terrible. The mother's worse.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I think because women are so hard on women.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this actually when I was reading your question as well, and I was thinking about The Road, by Cormac McCarthy. I don't know if that's an amazing, all-time book, and that's a father-son thing. And sort of the mother has opted out, it's the end of the world, and she's just decided, not for me. And you're like, yeah. And it obviously every kind of depiction is valid, and it doesn't mean, I think there's perfectly legitimate choices for the author to make. But I don't know if that's prevailing.
Yeah, I have a theory. Mm-hmm. I have a theory. I think my theory, just because of my own writing, the one mother figure is also terrible. And I'm like, I wonder if because I have such a wonderful relationship with my mother, I feel like I have permission to write a poor mother because I don't feel like I'm doing my mother a disservice, but I feel like the father figure, I have to redeem him, or I have to make sure he's a good guy because I have a worse relationship with my father, or not as a good relationship with my father. So personal insight, but also theory.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like that. I should tell my mom that she inspired mine just to see her reaction. I have a great relationship with my mom, but I do like to harass her.
Yeah. Shout out to all the mothers. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's an interesting one. I think in terms of, I'm trying to think of kind of male depictions I've read recently. Yeah, maybe we do cut literary men more slack. I think as well in TV, like TV is an obvious one where it's like, I don't know if you guys have seen The Last of Us recently, which I love.
I haven't watched it, but I have watched my brothers play the video game many times.
I see. It was the last PlayStation game I ever played, and that is a sort of father loses his daughter, then it's the apocalypse, then he's tasked with taking this other teenage girl he doesn't know on a big journey, and it's sort of how they grow. And I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm not going to spoil anything from that, but I think if you think of it, it reminded me a bit of things like Breaking Bad and Mad Men, where the central male protagonist is like awful. And but you're like, yes, I hope he wins, because obviously you want the show to continue. You want the plot to carry on, and you're obviously like rooting for these guys. And I think The Last of Us, the game in particular, did some really interesting things with that because you're the participant, you're the one doing everything. But you know, if you think in Breaking Bad, even you had Skylar White and Walter White, and obviously Walter White is the bad guy, but everyone's like, yeah, what a legend. And then everyone found his wife. His wife was annoying because she was sort of trying to put the brakes on his on his plan.
She didn't want to have the whole illegal drug ring. Like, what?
Like, oh, what a spoil sport. Yeah.
yeah. It's always the woman's fault.
So boring.
Yeah. No, so I wonder if we're harsher on, or not we necessarily, but if
us three people right here.
the female characters get a rawer deal, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think the other one is, so there's a guy I met who he was basically trying to make this kind of the female bond. You know, he was writing screenplay and he was like, look, there is no serialized female character that could run and run and run. You know, where he was like,
yeah,
why couldn't I do the kind of female bond? And you are like, yeah, well, you know, why is that? Why is there not the...
Because there's not a good enough sports bra.
Yeah, maybe. Come on, Nike.
Got to invent that first. And then but that's a really good point. Like, I want a female bond.
I mean, my first thought was Lara Croft, but she's more like a female Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
that's cool. You know, I think Indiana Jones is cool.
So to wrap up, one last question for you, and you kind of already alluded to this. Talking about sports, you also talk a lot about thriving on companionship and being in a group. Do you feel like TikTok and the community there has become that group, or are capable of becoming that kind of community?
Yeah, I think like the people, we're talking about people in my live reads, but you recognize the names and people keep coming back. And, you know, even if they're, you don't have any interaction beyond that, they're like, oh, hi. And you're like, hi. And it's actually just really nice just to see those. And I think online in particular, like, you know, people talk about it and it can be not always the friendliest place, but I think sometimes the friendly people are just quiet and they are actually, they're actually there, they're actually listening, they're actually joining in. And the other thing I do is I write a weekly email newsletter. And it's amazing how many people, you know, so some people on it are my friends. So it's almost like we won't speak. And then when they see me, they're like, oh, I read, you know, been reading your newsletter, or, you know, eventually I'll get an email from a stranger and they'll be like, oh, I'm loving these, you know, and it's because people don't reply to everything. You know, but people don't always they're not just going to sort of pump your tires every live read for no reason. But people are there. Yeah. I think it is quite inherently a supportive place. And I think the other thing with books, and like, you know, you can obviously, people have different opinions on them, and there's all different types of books that people are into, but it's kind of inherently like a nice thing to do, to sit and read a book. So I think that everyone's just kind of there bonded over what is essentially like a really nice, valuable, pretty healthy shared interest. And so it is inherently quite a supportive place, I think. So it's, and, you know, I've spoken to other people that make content and like on TikTok and places like that, and they definitely have found it like helpful. You know, they live on their own, and they're kind of connecting with a group of people online and stuff. It's actually like, I think it is a supportive place generally. Oh, that's how I found it anyway. And
I agree.
Yeah, and I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it way more than I kind of thought I would, and it's been great. And yeah, I'm just going to carry on with it for a bit.
It is funny where it's like when we do lives, we'll have like 70, 80 people watching, and then only like 10 are really talking. So you're like, what are the rest of you doing?
But it's funny, sometimes they're at work, they're like, oh, my boss is here, and then
it's true.
Like, you know, but yeah, people might be on the bus, or they might be, you know, they could be anywhere. So it's actually, I think it's quite sweet, really, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, the reason why I think I keep catching, like, I take like afternoon break. I work from home, and I'll take like a afternoon break, and then all of us like just scrolling through TikTok, and it's just, that's always when you're reading. So I'm sure your US audience, or at least the West Coast people, are like, it's that like you're just really tired and you're overworked, but you have to just keep going for a couple more hours. So you're going to like distract yourself. So that's your West Coast audience right there.
You've given me my customer avatar for the for the Pacific time zone, whatever it is.
So I might edit this part out, but I have separate questions, and these are not formal questions. These are things that I never get to talk to the author when I read a book. So this is like, one, what's a posh punch?
So I went to private school, so, you know, inherently I'm like a posh boy, and so the joke was that no one fights at private schools. You just get suspended straight away. Whereas at state school, everyone knows how to fight because it's a sort of daily occurrence. So a posh punch would be a sort of...
Like
So you can't throw a punch is what I am hearing.
I'm definitely more a lover than I am a fighter.
Or like you were saying that someone tried to like gouge your eyes out at one point and you had to throw back their fingers.
Well, I was stuck. I was like stuck on the floor. So I couldn't do a lot about it other than kind of grab blindly at them.
They're gouging your eyes on the floor?
Yeah.
What the hell? I did water polo for 1 year and it was girls are mean.
I've heard that is mean. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I'm sorry that happened to you.
Thank you. I mean, I eventually in college I did MMA for 4 years, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was the only girl and I was like with a bunch of guys and they were very nice to me. So, I mean,
I wouldn't mess around with you. Yeah. No.
Oh, well, it's been like 10 years so I could throw a posh punch now.
Join us.
Pigeon, is that really an insult?
Yeah, so it's something actually really oddly like there was a rugby coach at our school that used to call people it as a sort of derogatory term, and then it almost got resuscitated at this one team I was at, and then I took it over to France, and then it's apparently an insult in French as well. It means a sort of banal, like dull person, I think.
they are kind of the rat of the sky.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
Poor pigeons.
And I think, and like, I remember someone sending it to me. It's funny what people decide, what people resonates with people from your work. But someone sent me a video. It was an ice hockey player, pro ice hockey player, and he was skating around. And he's like, "You're a fucking pigeon." And he's like, "Oh." So I was like, "Oh, cool." It's like hit Canada.
I recently, because like I said, I read trash books, and one of which I got into like a sports mode of like, so I read a bunch of hockey ones, and then I watched some hockey clips, and I'm not entirely sure that's a real sport because it's just, they just fight, and then the refs are like, all right.
I think
I
think to be fair, that what they're best at isn't the hockey, but it's actually skating, because not only can they can play hockey while skate, but they can actually fight while skating. So it's like they're so good at skating. I've got such a good trash sports story for you, book wise. So my brother played pro rugby as well, and he played for Bath, like our home team. And he's had the same girlfriend, like they're still together. They were together from when they're 14. And then there's this lady, this American lady, who became fan of the team. And she would travel over from the US and kind of go to like different games and like see some different teams and, you know, do a bit of traveling around. And she was a romance author, like self-published, like on Amazon. And she got in touch, and then she ended up sponsoring one of his friends, like, because each player can get like a jersey sponsor or something. And she sponsored like one of his friends. But she actually, he didn't tell me this for a while after, but she asked if him and his girlfriend and me would like to pose for the cover image for one of her romance books. And
you said yes, right?
No, well, he didn't tell me. He declined. He was like, and when he did tell me, he said, "Oh, I was tempted to say yes because I thought it'd be funny, and then I realised that this cover was probably going to insinuate that you and I were going to kind of share my girlfriend."
It was probably like my brother's girl, and that's where,
brothers to teammates to lovers or something.
I'd read it.
So I mean, if there's a publisher who wants to, get the big bucks out, then maybe we could, get back in the gym and.
I don't know. I feel like, Ben, you might have missed your calling. You and your brother can be like romance cover models. It's not too late,
Plot twist: the author's me.
Still read it. Please write that. All right, my last question. You said your shoulders are funny looking now.
Yeah. Are you trying to get me to take my t-shirt off?
No, just
I knew this would happen at some point.
Yeah. All right, so this is also video recorded, and if it can be done slowly, that would be ideal.
Have you got any music?
Pony starts playing.
I've not got Channing's rhythm, I'm afraid. Yeah. No, the collarbones.
Because like I have this.
Oh, she broke her elbow, so she's double jointed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not really double jointed. I ran into a wall as a child and they never caught it.
No, it's just so you've got little lumps that poke out on the collarbone. The collarbone sticks out both sides. So
I feel like you can really do something with that for Halloween.
Oh, like extend it.
Horns, yeah.
You're saying that I'm scary to kids?
No.
Yeah, that's so mean. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, like to your point, I might have missed the cover model, the book cover opportunity. Weird shoulders, rule me out.
No, with your shoulders, you can go into like so many genres now.
Actually, that's true. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, you're not limited. Well, thank you so much for such a lovely interview. I've enjoyed this so
good.
much.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. You're charming and hilarious, which you don't always anticipate when watching people on TikTok.
You made our job easy.
Yeah, seriously.
I'll put that on my LinkedIn. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. New tagline.
Yeah, so everyone, please. Oh, would you like to drop any of your handles? So that
I'm BCE Mercer, MERCER, like on everything. I actually have an imposter, so don't fall for him. He keeps trying to charge people for horoscope readings, so that's not me. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm BCE Mercer, and I've got a link tree on there. But if you want to follow me or sign up for my weekly newsletter, I'd love to have you. And yeah, that'd be great.
Everyone, go check out Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this mini episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com or via our Camflare voicemail system. Please visit booktalkforbooktalk.com for more information.
You can also follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle Book Talk for Book Talk. Bye!
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.